The sun had barely risen over the kingdom of Alara when the heavy iron gates shrieked and splintered under the crushing weight of battering rams. The Kovu clan had arrived. They were a ruthless faction of massive, heavily muscled warriors from the harsh outer ridges. Driven by deep envy and a bitter blood claim to the land, they fought with raw, terrifying energy. Their heavy war clubs shattered the shields of the defending guards in seconds. When the main gates finally collapsed, thousands of Kovu warriors surged directly into the heart of the kingdom. They did not stop to loot the markets. They ignored the screaming villagers hiding in the alleyways. Their eyes were fixed entirely on the high palace. They had come solely for the crown. The palace guards tried desperately to hold the marble steps, but it was a massacre. The kingdom of Alara was impossibly wealthy, but its people were soft. Because almost every citizen lived in luxury, very few ever signed up to endure the brutal training required to become a true warrior. Seeing his untrained guards being effortlessly slaughtered, the king of Alara made a desperate choice. Hoping to spare his people further bloodshed, he ordered his men to stand down. The palace warriors and the high chiefs dropped their weapons. They fell to their knees in the courtyard, submitting to the Kovu clan out of pure fear. But the leader of the Kovu clan did not come to show mercy. He walked slowly through the kneeling crowd, his massive chest heaving. Without a single word of parley, he raised his heavy blade and slaughtered the king and queen right in front of their helpless, weeping people. The royal bloodline was completely severed, or so the Kovu leader thought. Someone was missing from the courtyard: the young Prince Zuka. Zuka was the king's only child. He had been raised in a loving environment, playing freely with the other children of the kingdom. But unlike the other noble children who obsessed over gold and fine silks, young Zuka was obsessed with strength. Even as a small boy, he would sneak away to watch the kingdom's few guards run their drills. He would repeatedly tell his father that he wanted to be the strongest man alive, deeply despising the idea of ever being weak. The king would always sigh, trying to teach his son that the true weight of leadership came from diplomacy, not brute force. Alara possessed a vein of the rarest, glowing blue or on the continent. Their massive wealth made them comfortable. But the Kovu clan shared a dark history with the throne. Generations ago, the Kovu ancestors had been the kingdom's vanguard. The Kovu leader believed it was his clan's rightful turn to rule the rich city. When Zuka's father flatly rejected their claim, the Kovu clan did not just walk away. They brought a war the kingdom was utterly unprepared to fight. As the massive Kovu warriors breached the palace walls, the king had foreseen the execution. He grabbed two of his most trusted, battle-hardened servants and ordered them to smuggle his son out of the city. The two servants dragged young Zuka down into the dark, forgotten catacombs beneath the palace. But their escape did not go unnoticed. Heavy, rapid footsteps echoed down the stone corridors right behind them. A squad of Kovu hunters was relentlessly pursuing them through the narrow, lightless routes. The servants ran until they reached a dead end, a partially collapsed tunnel leading out to the harsh wilderness. The heavy boulders left only a tiny, jagged crevice. Hearing the Kovu hunters drawing their blades just around the corner, the first servant shoved young Zuka hard toward the gap. The prince scrambled, squeezing his small body into the tight rock fissure where the massive enemy warriors could never fit. The second servant grabbed Zuka by the collar one last time, pressing a heavy, carved stone necklace, the royal crest of Alara, into the boy's trembling hands. "Run!" the servant screamed, drawing his own short sword and turning back to face the dark corridor. Zuka slipped through the rocks and tumbled out into the freezing mud of the outer wilderness. As he pushed himself up, he heard the brutal, sickening sounds of his two protectors being hacked to pieces on the other side of the stone. Alone in the vast, unforgiving wastelands, the young prince gripped the stone necklace. The tears on his face dried in the cold wind, replaced by a burning, dark realization. His father's peaceful ways had gotten everyone killed. He swore to the wilderness that he would never, ever be weak again. For weeks, young Zuka dragged himself through the unforgiving wastelands. He crossed violent, rushing rivers and navigated dense, predator-filled forests guided entirely by raw survival instinct. He ate bitter roots and slept in the freezing mud. Every night, shivering in the dark, his mind replayed the slaughter of his parents. The guilt crushed him. He convinced himself that if he had not been a soft, weak child of luxury, he could have picked up a blade and protected his family. On a dusty trade road miles away from Alara, destiny intervened. Zuka collapsed in the dirt right in the path of a traveling merchant named Kazi, who was hauling supplies back from a neighboring kingdom. Seeing the battered, starving boy, Kazi stopped his cart. Remembering the dying servant's strict warning never to reveal his royal blood, Zuka looked up and delivered a flawless lie. He claimed he was a nameless orphan whose village had been burned by raiders. Touched by the boy's hardened eyes, Kazi lifted him into the cart and took him to a distant village far from the reach of the Kovu clan. Kazi had 4 grown children. They welcomed Zuka into their home, treating him as their own blood. Zuka ate dinner at their wooden table, laughed with the older boys, and worked diligently as Kazi's apprentice in the market. But the smiles were a mask. Deep inside his chest, the urge for pure vengeance burned like an uncontrollable furnace. He refused to forget. Every single year on the exact anniversary of the palace massacre, Zuka would take a sharpened iron nail, go out into the dark woods alone, and violently carve a deep, jagged scar across his own chest. It was his visual ledger, a permanent, painful reminder of every year he spent living in peace while his enemies sat on his throne. Years passed. By his late teenage years, Zuka was a hardened errand boy managing Kazi's heavy cargo. But one night in the city slums, his true nature was finally awakened. Walking back to the village, Zuka heard the roaring cheers of a massive crowd echoing from a torchlit alley. He pushed his way to the front of the circle and witnessed a brutal underground fighting match. In the center of the dirt ring stood a towering giant of a man, built with massive, bulging muscles, swinging wildly. His opponent was a man named Toru, much smaller in size, but built with dense, coiled muscle. The giant charged, swinging a massive haymaker aimed at Toru's head. Toru didn't block. He ducked under the heavy arm with terrifying speed, pivoted on his heel, and drove 2 rapid, bone-cracking strikes directly into the giant's ribs. As the giant doubled over in pain, Toru stepped in and delivered a devastating, upward palm strike straight to the giant's jaw. The sheer force lifted the massive man entirely off his feet, dropping him unconscious into the dirt in a matter of seconds. Zuka's eyes widened. He immediately broke through the crowd and followed Toru into the shadows of the fighting pits. Zuka blocked the fighter's path and looked him dead in the eye. He didn't ask to learn how to fight. He demanded that Toru train him to be stronger than him. Toru stopped and laughed out loud. He told Zuka that in all his years in the fighting pits, no boy had ever had the guts to disrespect him to his face. Intrigued by the pure, unblinking fire in Zuka's eyes, Toru accepted. The training that followed was a nightmare. Toru intentionally subjected Zuka to the most brutal physical conditioning a human body could endure. He forced Zuka to repeatedly punch solid stone walls until his knuckles bled and calcified. He made him carry massive tree trunks up steep ravines with a thick rope tied around his neck. Toru beat him relentlessly, telling Zuka that to surpass him, his body had to forget the concept of pain. Zuka never complained, not once. The burning rage inside him was far stronger than any physical pain Toru could inflict. Even when Toru left the camp to sleep, Zuka stayed awake, violently striking the training posts until his hands went numb. After years of agonizing preparation, Zuka transformed into a flawless, living weapon. His chest and arms were now completely covered in raised, crocodile-like scars. He finally stepped into the underground ring. The crowd mocked his youth, placing bets on his massive, battle-scarred opponent. When the match started, the opponent rushed forward. Zuka sidestepped the attack with blinding speed, planted his foot, and delivered a single, crushing straight punch to the man's ribcage. The sound of snapping bone echoed through the silent crowd. The massive fighter collapsed, instantly sent into a deep coma from a single strike. Zuka tore through the fighting circuit. He continuously knocked out giants twice his size in under a minute, breaking jaws, arms, and femurs with calculated precision. But as his undefeated streak grew, his ego and his repressed rage completely took over. He stopped pulling his punches. He no longer just sent men into comas. He began delivering fatal strikes to the throat and temple, permanently sending his opponents to their ancestors right there in the dirt ring. He became notoriously popular, but his lethal reputation bred intense envy. One night, a rival fighting syndicate cornered Zuka in a narrow, dead-end alley. 10 men surrounded him, drawing heavy iron axes and jagged swords. Zuka did not run. He let his unmatched rage explode. He ducked under the first axe swing, grabbed the attacker's arm, and snapped it backward at the elbow. He ripped the axe from the screaming man's hand and waded directly into the blades. Zuka fought like a starved predator. He shattered knees, severed tendons, and dodged sword strikes by mere inches, burying his fists into their windpipes. In less than 2 minutes, the alley was completely silent. Half of the syndicate lay dead in the mud, sent to their ancestors, while the survivors crawled away into the dark with permanently shattered bones. His physical forging was complete. That night, exactly 16 years after he was smuggled out of Alara, Zuka returned to the merchant's house. He sat beside Kazi in the dark room. For the first time in his life, he dropped the lie. He looked at the man who had saved him and revealed his true identity. He was Prince Zuka, the rightful heir to the kingdom of Alara and the survivor of the Kovu massacre. The old man sat in stunned, terrified silence. The next morning, before the sun even crested the horizon, Zuka packed his jagged war club and a short sword. His chest was covered in 16 deep scars. He did not say goodbye. He turned his back on the village and began the long march back to Alara. The time for hiding was over. The Prince of Scars was coming for his throne. 16 years after he was chased into the mud, Zuka walked back through the massive iron gates of Alara as a full-grown, heavily scarred warrior. No one recognized him. The villagers and the Kovu guards simply saw a massive, hooded mercenary with a heavy war club slung over his shoulder. He navigated the outer slums, seeking out the hidden hut of his father's last surviving loyal general, a man named Bateau. When Zuka entered the dim hut, he did not waste time explaining himself. He reached into his cloak and dropped the heavy, carved stone necklace, the royal crest of Alara, onto the wooden table. Bateau stared at the crest, his eyes widening in shock. He looked up, recognizing the fierce, unyielding eyes of the boy he thought had died in the wastelands. The old general immediately dropped to his knees and bowed to Prince Zuka. Bateau quickly gathered the few surviving loyalist warriors in the hidden cellar. Zuka laid out his strategy. It was a completely suicidal plan. He instructed Bateau's men to scale the back walls in the dark and quietly eliminate the archers. Meanwhile, Zuka would march straight through the heavily fortified main entrance alone. Bateau argued that charging the front gate solo was certain death, but Zuka's eyes were cold. He didn't see anything suicidal about it. He saw it as a reckoning. That night, the plan was set into motion. As Bateau's men silently choked out the Kovu guards on the high walls, Zuka walked directly up to the massive palace doors. He didn't knock. He raised his heavy, iron-spiked war club and smashed the wooden doors completely off their hinges. The palace courtyard erupted. Dozens of heavily armored Kovu warriors charged him. Zuka fought with a blinding, burning rage that had been fermenting for 16 years. He swung his war club with raw, explosive power, shattering iron shields into splinters and caving in chest plates. He didn't fight defensively. He waded straight into their blades, letting his scarred skin take shallow cuts while he broke arms and crushed skulls. He single-handedly slaughtered every single Kovu warrior that tried to block his path, leaving a trail of broken bodies all the way to the throne room doors. He kicked the doors open. Sitting on the stolen throne was the aging Kovu leader who had murdered his parents. The elite royal guards charged down the steps. Zuka dropped his war club, drew his jagged short sword, and dismantled them in seconds. He severed hamstrings, snapped wrists, and buried his blade into their necks. With the guards dead, Zuka marched up the marble steps. The Kovu leader drew his heavy broadsword, but Zuka moved with predatory speed. He ducked the heavy swing, lunged forward, and grabbed the Kovu leader directly by the throat with his iron grip. He lifted the massive man off the ground and slammed him down onto the hard marble floor. Zuka mounted him. He raised his heavy, scarred fist and brought it down directly into the leader's face. Crack. He hit him again. Crack. Zuka unleashed 16 years of agony, delivering devastating, heavy punches. Even when the Kovu leader's body went completely limp and stopped shaking, Zuka did not stop. He kept hitting him over and over, his knuckles splitting, until his entire arm was soaked in thick blood. Finally, breathing heavily, Zuka stopped. He stood up over the unrecognizable body, threw his head back, and let out a massive, deafening scream of pure rage that echoed through the entire palace. The remaining Kovu clan surrendered. The people of Alara rushed the courtyard, weeping in joy and accepting Zuka as their rightful king. They believed their suffering was over. But Zuka's vengeance did not stop with the Kovu. Sitting on the throne, Zuka looked down at his kneeling, weeping citizens. He did not feel pity. He felt intense disgust. He saw the exact same vulnerability and weakness that had gotten his parents slaughtered. He decided he would never allow his people to be victims again, even if he had to break them to do it. He began to rule with an iron fist. He enacted a forced military draft. He forcefully dragged the soft farmers, the wealthy traders, and the young men from their homes. He commanded them to drop their tools and pick up heavy iron swords. He personally oversaw their training, inflicting the exact same brutal, agonizing conditioning that Toru had forced upon him in the fighting pits. The training was horrific. Many of the soft villagers could not handle the physical torture. Scores of young men succumbed to the sheer trauma, their bodies shattering under the agony of the relentless beatings and impossible labor. Zuka felt absolutely nothing for the men who died in the dirt. He coldly viewed them as weak links and necessary collateral damage. But those who survived the brutal forging were transformed into heavily muscled, ruthless, and deeply feared warriors. With his new lethal army, Zuka waged endless, unprovoked wars. He marched his forces across the borders, slaughtering neighboring kingdoms, burning villages, and hoarding resources to build a massive empire of fear. He believed that striking first and terrifying the continent was the only way to protect Alara. He looked in the mirror and saw exactly what he had always wanted to be, the strongest man alive. But back in Alara, his reign brought total calamity. Because the farmers were forced into war, the crops died. Mass starvation swept the kingdom. Endless bloodshed drained the city's youth, and absolute terror kept the citizens locked inside their homes. The people wept in the dark. They realized a horrifying truth. They actually wished for the return of the Kovu clan. The Kovu had been cruel, but they had never inflicted this level of pure, systematic terror. The people had prayed for Prince Zuka to return and rule with the peaceful love of his father, but they were devastatingly wrong. The prince they loved died in the wastelands 16 years ago. The man on the throne was a monster. The breaking point finally arrived during the dry season. A small outer farming village of Alara reached its limit. Desperate and starving, the village elders barred their wooden gates and flatly refused to surrender their remaining young sons to Zuka's military draft. Furious at the open defiance, Zuka led his ruthless army personally. He ordered a brutal crackdown to make an example of them. His soldiers smashed the gates, setting the granaries on fire and dragging the resisting farmers into the streets. Zuka marched through the burning village, his heavy war club dripping with fresh blood. He tracked a fleeing figure into a dead-end alleyway between two burning huts. He cornered his target against the mud brick wall, raising his jagged club high into the air to strike. But his arm froze. Cowering in the dirt, pressed hard against the wall with nowhere to run, was a terrified 7-year-old boy. The child was completely alone, his clothes torn, his face heavily smeared with ash and tears. As the massive shadow of the king fell over him, the boy squeezed his eyes shut, violently trembling, just waiting for the heavy club to end his life. Zuka stared down at the weeping child. In that exact fraction of a second, the thick, violent haze that had clouded his mind for 16 years completely lifted. He did not see a defiant villager in the dirt. He saw himself. He saw the helpless, terrified prince squeezed into the dark rocks beneath the palace, listening to his protectors being slaughtered. Zuka looked at his own massive, heavily scarred arm. He looked at the blood dripping from his iron weapon. He looked around at the burning homes of his own citizens, hearing the exact same screams of pure terror that the Kovu clan had caused when he was a boy. The horrifying, crushing truth hit his chest like a physical blow. He had not saved his people. He had not protected Alara. He had simply replaced the monster who destroyed his family. He had become the exact nightmare he swore to eradicate. The heavy war club slipped from Zuka's fingers, crashed into the dirt with a heavy thud. The young boy opened his tear-filled eyes, flinching. Zuka did not speak. His chest heaved as the immense weight of his guilt crashed down on him. He reached up with trembling, blood-stained hands and unclasped the heavy, golden crown of Alara from his head, the very crown he had sacrificed his soul to reclaim. He let it fall into the mud beside the weapon. Without uttering a single word to his generals or his soldiers, Zuka turned his back. He walked straight through the ranks of his confused, bloodied army, leaving the burning village behind. He walked past the kingdom's borders and stepped directly into the deep, unforgiving wilderness. He willingly condemned himself to eternal, isolated exile, knowing that removing himself from the world was the only way his broken kingdom could finally heal. He never returned to Alara, but years later, whispers traveled across the trade routes. Merchants spoke of a massive, heavily scarred warrior who wandered the far-distant kingdoms. He possessed nothing but the clothes on his back, practicing the only thing he had ever truly known: fighting. He fought in the brutal underground pits, dismantling giants with unmatched, explosive power, refusing to take lives or hold any titles. The continent simply knew the unstoppable, wandering fighter by one name: Prince Zuka. Today, when the world hears the name Killmonger, they picture the Marvel movie villain. They picture Eric Stevens, the highly trained Black Ops mercenary covered in tribal scars, who returns to the hidden nation of Wakanda to overthrow the king. They picture a man fueled by deep trauma, who wants to use Wakanda's advanced weapons to wage a global war to free the oppressed, only to become a violent oppressor himself. But true legends of pain and vengeance were not born in a comic book writer's room. Long before Killmonger challenged T'Challa at the waterfall, the true story of the scarred royal exile who became a monster to save his people was already carved into ancient history. He didn't need a vibranium suit. His armor was the thick, painful ledger of scars physically carved into his own flesh. He didn't need modern military tactics. He used the raw, explosive rage forged in the brutal fighting pits to reclaim his throne. So, the next time you see Killmonger on the screen, declaring that he lived his entire life waiting for this moment, ask yourself, is he just a Hollywood antagonist? Or is he the tragic, forgotten echo of Prince Zuka, the scarred king who had to lose his crown to finally find his humanity?